technicians and their crews on scene with our command vehicle and our breathing apparatus vehicle. At present, it's very quiet. The Divisional Commander Frank Forbay is doing a preliminary inspection now currently on the 4th and the 5th floor to see whether there are any further hotspots. We have been assisted by EMS with their drone in terms of looking for further hotspots with a thermal imaging camera. At present, as indicated, it's very quiet. Yesterday, it's between 4 and 5 o'clock. It was pretty quiet up till then, but there was a lot of heat that was trapped up on the 4th and the 5th floor. And while firefighting crews were up there, the southeaster, as it does normally in Cape Town, increased, and with a little bit of ventilation, the fire caught hold in between the roof voids up on the 5th floor, and then the fire spread from there quite rapidly, even with the crews up in the vicinity. At that time, we had 6 fire engines on scene. They requested an extra 4 fire engines just after 5 o'clock, and since then the crews have been working throughout the night, and around 11 o'clock last night they pretty much got the fire under control, and then it was the hard slog of doing damping down and making sure that the fire didn't spread any further than that. So at present, very quiet, and if nothing further, or they do the final inspections and they find that everything's out, probably by the end of the day we should be having this thing sorted out and then handing over the building to the authorities for further inspections.
By the end of the evening yesterday, there were concerns about the rafters on the roof of the National Assembly chamber. Are you able to give us an update around whether they are still intact, if they've collapsed? What's the state of the roof of the National Assembly chamber?
Mr. Abrams was up there. He can give you direct information around that roof, but there are sections, if you're looking at the National Assembly, there's a copper covered roofing that's on top there. A large section, if you're looking at the building now to your left, there's a large section of the roof that has collapsed, but it hasn't collapsed further than the 4th and the 5th floor. Mr. Abrams could give you further information exactly in terms of those rafters.
Okay, Mercedes here from SABC. What is the current state of the building of the old assembly? And also, why didn't you use water bombs? Somebody said, from a layman's position, is that you don't need water bombs here because the building would have collapsed. It is for fell fires. So you, the expert, can you explain?
Okay, just in terms of the old National Assembly, that old the 5th floor, that roof and everything, that structure's all destroyed. The floors below that have got extensive smoke and water damage. And then to answer your question with regards to aerial water bombing on a structural fire, when the request came through for using aerial support, the roof was still intact. So if you're going to water bomb with a helicopter with a roof that's intact, it's going to serve absolutely no purpose. Internal firefighting is the best method for that. If the roof had vented and they're still wanting to use aerial support and water bombing, there are crews inside there are crews outside. It's a very dangerous practice to use water bombing on a structural fire.
Is it safe to go into any? I know that other one is not safe. Is it safe to go in there? And by yesterday, JP Smith was saying that the old assembly chamber was still standing. It was only the new wing chamber which had collapsed. What is the situation?
Okay, from our knowledge, and Mr. Abrams will probably give you confirmation of that, the new National Assembly, which is that building straight through the doors, that is completely destroyed from bottom right through to the top. The old National Assembly, my understanding, is where the gym area is and offices, where that is destroyed and indicated. It's on the 5th floor, but the floors beneath that has got smoke and water damage.
So would you say the chamber, the new wing chamber, National Assembly, is completely destroyed? By yesterday they said it was 98%?
Yeah, it's completely destroyed. It's going to take a lot of rehabilitation to get that back to where it was.
Mr. Abrams, can you give us an update on the roof?
Okay, as the chief said, the roof structure has collapsed in certain areas. You must remember this roof is made up of a center copper roof sheeting. So it's a corrugated sheeting, apparently made out of copper. and then the areas around it is tiled. The roof construction is, as you look at it now, it's a tiled roof on the outside. Underneath the tile, you've got a bitumen waterproofing layer. Underneath that, you've got tongue and groove Oregon pine, like floorboards. Remember, it's a very old building, very old construction. That's the type of construction method they used in the past. So it's your tile, the bitumen layer, which is highly flammable, and according to the technicians here, they just replaced that bitumen layer a few years ago, so still fresh bitumen, okay, flammable. Wooden floorboards underneath that, and then you've got the roof void. Then of course, the building being so old, there's probably lots of dust and things up there, and these are all flammable and fuel for a fire. So what happened was, as soon as the southeaster came up yesterday, there was a bit of venting, and the trapped heat inside, and the fire just took off. So
Do
all
you
those.
have an idea on when the cleanup can start?
Well, at this moment in time, like Mr. Schnettler said, we will hand, once we finish, once we're happy that the building is safe from a fire point of view, we will hand over to SAP, and the police services will then get most probably structural engineers in. Once they've done their inspection, the police, structural engineers will then come in, and that's up to them to decide when they're going to start cleaning up, etc.
Sam, what are the hotspots currently at the moment inside?
Well, at the moment, according to Mr. Forbay, that's just doing another survey right now, there are very, very few hotspots, and that's why they're doing a survey now, just to check on that.
But it's in the National Assembly.
In the National Assembly, the new National Assembly, and the area above that, yeah, the office area above that.
What is it that can actually cause it to reignite again? Is it wind or anything? Are you really sure that you put out the fire?
Well, yes. That's why they're going to be here the whole day. They're going to be monitoring all the areas, making sure that any smoldering embers that may still be there are extinguished. So they'll be here the whole day doing that. And yes, if the southeaster comes up a bit later on, there is always that possibility, but we will have crews on site to knock it down before that happens. So that's what they're doing right now, making sure that all hot areas are extinguished.
Tell me about the roof on top, because I understood that the reason why it was so fueling is because it's wooden structures on top. Tell us what is happening there,
Yep,
and what
yep.
is the situation right there from the roof?
Yeah, sorry ma'am, obviously yesterday with the fire and the fire going into the National Assembly section, without the fire actually venting through the roof, if you can imagine an oven, and you keep the door closed, you want to keep the heat inside, and that builds up inside, and that's what basically cooks your food. Same thing happens in this thing. Your wheat gets trapped up into the top layers of the building, and everything gets heated up. And what Mr. Abrams has indicated with the bitumen and with the flammable material and dust collection, it's a recipe for a fire to take off. And as I said early on, we had crews up there, they were on site, and that fire then still took off in terms of those things. So in terms of your question, ma'am, with that heat, all that heat got trapped up in that roof section.
What are the operations for the rest of the day?
We've got fresh crews coming in this morning to relieve the 2 fire engines that are currently on site, and those crews will be, as Mr. Abrams has indicated, will be monitoring the situation throughout the day to ensure that there is no reignition of any type of embers at the end of the day. I have given instruction to my crews that they will not leave this site until the last spark or ember is out in this building.
And how are the firefighters doing? Last night we heard reports of the firefighters not having been fed, not having received water. Michael member Jackie Smith refuted that, saying that fresh crews were brought in at about 5 o'clock last night.
Now, yesterday from about 2 o'clock the crews arrived on scene. The previous crews were relieved. So from 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon until I left here, it was still the crews that had arrived from 2 o'clock. So they'd only been here about 5 or 6 hours. We did arrange meals for the staff members, albeit it came through a little bit late, but last night, when just after I left, they were fed with 2 meals last night at the end of the day. Unfortunately, it is if you want to call it a complaint that comes from some of our firefighters, but we do make arrangements to feed them as best we can at the scene.
And the safety is not only about putting the fire out, it's also about cooling of the building. Yesterday, the Minister, Patricia Dolol, was saying they're waiting for the building to be cooled off, then you hand it over so that the investigations start. Are you satisfied with the building cooled off? Because yesterday I understood it was at 200. degrees.
Yeah, there's quite a high temperatures yesterday evening, but at the moment the building is quite cool, but it's still unsafe for anybody that's going in without any safety equipment and that's not experienced in terms of firefighting or structural. So the building is not going to be declared open for anybody to go in until we're satisfied that it's safe enough for them to go in.
There's also concerns about the fire moving towards the train.
Minister Dalal and the Speaker were here, and there was a concern about it, but the firefighters at that time had already reached into the roof section. There was request to cut the tree down between Tainhuis and the National Assembly. It wasn't necessary because the firefighters had it under control, and at the time and up to now, and I think right throughout the whole of the operations yesterday and the day before, there was no real threat to Tainhuis because that was averted quite well.
So the valve, one of the valves that kicks the sprinkler into action, according to reports, was closed prior to the fire started. Who gives authority or permission for the closing or reopening of such an important valve?
I think so that's still subject to investigation in terms of that, and that once the SAPs, they're taking over the investigation around the forensic aspect of it, and they will be able to give you a report on that.
But isn't there a regulation in the fire regulation determining whose responsibility is the closure and the reopening of a valve?
That's a subject in terms of I'm not sure what your valve you're talking about in terms of
the valve. Apparently the valve was closed that kicks the water sprinkling into action. That is what is alleged. I'm not saying it's a fact, it's an allegation.
Those are still maybe allegations, and it has to be confirmed or denied by the forensic investigation.
If there are no more questions, I still have, and maybe a follow-up depending on what you're going to say. I want to ask you about the NCOP. When I came here on the day the fire started early in the morning, I initially thought it was in the NCOP side because I went from that side, I couldn't enter. It was very early. I want to know, has the NCOP, because these buildings are connected, is there somewhere where the NCOP has been touched? I mean, it's connected to the National Assembly, the old Assembly building. Because initially I thought it was the NCOP that was burning, so it wasn't. Is there anything, a door or window which has been touched or affected by the fire?
I'm not sure which the NCOP at myself, what is actually the NCOP section of the building.
Is there at the corner? It's opposite,
is that where the gym area of the Parliament?
No, it's the NCOP, the National Council of Provinces. Is there a change?
So it's maybe a difficult question to ask the firefighters. Because remember, they're not familiar with the names of the buildings, the layout of the buildings. So it's a bit unfair, and that's why the chief is saying it's where the gym area is, and the offices in that section that took alight and was destroyed.
Okay, then.
So if that is the NCOP, I don't know, but that is the area.
Then the question that you can answer for me: how many buildings have been burnt or have been affected? Then I will know whether the NCOP has been affected or not.
Okay. Well, if you're looking at the building from now, the National Assembly and the floors on the fifth and the fifth floor, from here, that's all affected up top here. And then if it is the NCOP, it's the building to the right, on the corner, on the end. That is the other section that's damaged, and that's also on the fifth floor where it's burnt through the roof.
Is that the NCOP?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay. We can ask the firefighters. They will not know the name of the buildings.
Also, the old assembly, which was said to house some of the old artifacts, which were still intact at the time we got the report, maybe a day or 2 days ago. Are those artifacts still intact?
From my understanding, and from having a brief inspection on Sunday when we came through from the old section, there is an artifact room and everything is intact there still.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those were the